Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is an indie darling about little balls building bridges that, in a way, managed to change the landscape of indie games as a whole. 2008's World of GOO.
Following that is 2007's Hotel Dusk, Room 215. A forgotten mystery adventure where you hold your Nintendo DS like a book, while guiding Kyle Hyde to piece together the mysteries of his past. Interesting to think about a theme for this week, whether you want to call it black or ink. I think that could somehow work together.
Ink could work.
Yeah,
it could work very well.
Like the balls of goo kind of looking ink-like, forming those structures together. And then for Hotel Dusk, it's all about the black and white drawings that really stand out against the colored backgrounds. We'll get to that. Very interesting soundtracks this week. I'm looking forward to talking about them. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Been playing Fire Emblem. Been getting ready for school in the next couple weeks. All going good.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy for me at work. I get to go to Los Angeles this weekend as of recording, so should be fun, busy times indeed. Maybe I gotta play something on Switch on the go. Katana Zero, I'm going through. There's still Valhalla sitting there, and we know we love that game, certainly. So plenty of things to play on the Switch, and of course, Hero for Super Smash Bros. Just came out as DLC, so plenty of things to play on the go. Let's start with your game this week, World of GOO.
Yeah, let's jump into the World of GOO, as one might call it. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's fine. Everything is fine. World of GOO was originally released as a digital download title on October 13th, 2008 for Wii and PC. It was one of the first WiiWare titles, I think, among them at the very least.
Interesting.
Or at least one of the first big indie games that made it big on WiiWare. Something along those lines. It has since also been released on Android and iOS as well as on the Switch. The game was developed by 2D Boy, which was a team formed of two ex-EA employees, which you hear that a lot when you are looking into indie games. It's always, they used to work for EA or they used to work for Activision. It's every time.
They're sick of the big companies. They want to make it on their own and make the games they want to make.
Yeah. And so their names are Kyle Gabler and Ron Carmel. That first name, he might come back. So just, keep him in mind. He's the composer. We'll get to it. And Alan Blomquist also came on to help port and optimize the game to work on the Wii, which is where it took off the most.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the first games that I downloaded on my Wii, and me and my sister played it all the time, actually. We got friends into it and stuff. It's very fun. It is a physics-based puzzle game where you take little goo balls and you have them connect using strands of goo to build things like towers or bridges or accomplish certain tasks or things like that. And the goal is always to get unused goo balls to a pipe at the end of each level. And that pipe will then suck up any goo balls that you did not use to solve the puzzle. And in order to complete the level, you need to have a certain amount or more left, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I realized while writing this outline that I am not very good at describing the gameplay of World of GOO, but it's basically a bridge builder game with goo balls.
And you just got to be smart on how you design it so that you have enough left over. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and there are also obstacles that can get rid of goo balls permanently. Like there are gears in some levels where if your goo balls touch it, they'll just pop and they're gone forever. Goodbye. Gravity is a constant enemy things like wind. It's entirely physics-based. We've seen a few games like that since. I think the Bridge Builder series of, I think, their browser games, especially has been that.
Mm-hmm. They had the Portal spinoff, yeah.
Yeah, but World of Goo, where it finds its sense of identity, its unique identity, is the different kinds of goo balls. So, of course, there are the basic goo balls. They're black, they have eyes, and they can create, I think, up to 2 to 3 connections, and they cannot be reused once they have been used. Once they've been used, they're done. But then there are green goos that can be reused, and they can create multiple other connections, and also, I believe, no, they can't connect to walls, but they're, like, they do really interesting things with the green goo balls, which is why I thought they connected to walls, because the first level where you're introduced to them, you have to climb up a wall using nothing but green goos. And so you have to, like, build a structure that sort of clings to the walls and then slowly inch it up every once in a while. It's a really, really interesting level, actually. I enjoy it. There are balloon goos, which are balloons. Red goos that are flammable. They're basically just matchsticks and stuff like that. And even more than that, I can't even remember all the kinds of goos that you can use in World of Goo. It's a very interesting game. There's even an online competitive mode called World of Goo Corporation, but I will get more into that in a second. There is a story to World of Goo, sort of, but not really. The different worlds take place during the different seasons, except for one of them, which takes place on the internet. And to summarize the story, it's basically the World of Goo Corporation is sucking goo balls into pipes and using them as power sources or grinding them into new products, stuff like that. And throughout the game, you will find signs written by the mysterious sign painter that will give clues about the world, but are also just, they're fun to read. They're very funny. They're very well written by Kyle Gabler, I believe. And just the game has a really fun sense of humor, I think, that I still really appreciate to this day. Have you ever played World of Goo?
I haven't, but it's always interesting to look back on World of Goo. When we talk about classic indie games, I think we always think of games like Super Meat Boy, like Bastion, games that in like 2010, I mean, with Xbox Live Arcade, like really changed the face of indie games at the time. Arguably, World of Goo did that first.
I think it did that first, and also for a reason we will get to a little bit further on in the podcast, they kind of helped change the way that indie games worked. Through their success. So development on World of Goo began in August 2006, but back then it was merely a freeware title called Tower of Goo that was being made for a thing called the Experimental Gameplay Project. And again, we'll get back to that in a bit. That's going to be more when we're talking about Kyle Gabler himself. I'll describe what that is, but in quick terms, it was basically just a group of people that did game jams every week. And Tower of Goo happened to be one of these. And it was basically just a physics-based building game where you use these little goo balls to build the highest tower you possibly can. And apparently, that prototype was made in 4 days by Kyle Gabler, which I can't even imagine being able to do that. I mean, I can, but not with something like that. This prototype would not only eventually spawn the full game, but it would also be incorporated into the previously mentioned World of Goo Corporation special mode in the final release. Basically, the way that mode works is for every level, any goo ball that you collect past the amount you need to successfully complete the level. So let's say you need 7 goo balls to complete the level, but you collect 9. 2 of those are going to go to the World of Goo Corporation, where you can then try and build the highest tower you possibly can. And when you go to build them, little clouds will start to pop up, and it'll tell you, this person in this country built it this high, and this person in this country built it this high. And so in this way, everybody on Earth is competing for the highest tower of goo and 2D Boy servers are constantly being updated with this information.
That's a really interesting way to provide asynchronous multiplayer and leaderboards that way.
Oh, yeah. And again, this was 2008 on the Wii.
Wii Connect 24.
Oh, boy. Gabler states that their decision to make Tower of Goo into a fully fledged game was basically because they happened to notice that a shady company was making a mobile knockoff of Tower of Goo. And he said that he felt really sad that somebody would just blatantly borrow somebody else's, blatantly steal somebody else's game design. So he and Carmel decided that, you know what, we're going to take this as a sign that we have good competition, and we're pretty sure that we can make Tower of Goo into a full game. And they did. According to Gabler and Carmel, World of Goo's development happened over the span of 2 years and costed around $10,000, all of which came out of pocket for the two of them.
Wow.
That included rent that they both had to pay, daily bills, that kind of thing. All came out of their savings. And they said that most of the development, I find this is incredible, most of the development on World of Goo was done in coffee houses that had Wi-Fi.
Well, yeah, again, I mean, before 2008, Wi-Fi was a pretty, it wasn't certainly as common as it is today, that's for sure. So that's really interesting. Yeah, you get the image of the starving artist and, writing my screenplay in a Starbucks or something like that. Yeah, no, build a game there.
I've seen tweets from other developers who have been like, I was working on my game in Starbucks and the barista started asking me about it or something like that. But I've never heard of a game that was like, yeah, almost all of the work was done there. That's insane. A few fun things that I stumbled upon while doing this research. After release, a bonus patch was announced called the Profanity Pack that would replace the grumbly voices that the Goo Balls make with curse words. This patch never came out.
Oh, man.
They also, and this is the one I find the most interesting of all of them. It's not the last one, but this is the best one, I think. They decided not to put DRM in the PC version because they believed that it would be a futile endeavor. Quote, every game for which there is demand will be cracked and find its way onto the scene, so why waste time and money trying to prevent the inevitable?
Boy, I wish other big companies had that kind of perspective.
Well, from the sound of it, that didn't go well. Apparently, they eventually reported that 1 in 10 copies of the PC version of World of Goo had been legitimately purchased. 1 in 10.
Oops.
That's a lot of pirated copies of World of Goo. Also, when they were getting ready for the European release, 2D Boy initially promised a whole new world based on the moon. But this also never happened, mainly because they kind of came to the conclusion that they felt like they were rushing content out just to justify a price tag, and they didn't like that. So there's no chapter on the moon. Oh, well.
Oh, so I just checked. I do have World of Goo in my Steam library, legitimately.
Yeah.
So I own
Good.
it. It was probably one from the humble bundles, like the really early ones. So no, I'm now interested to play it. Actually,
it's still installed on a Wii somewhere in my apartment. I'm pretty sure I have it on Steam as well. I haven't bought it on Switch yet. I've been meaning to. All of their games are on Switch. They've taken a real shine to the Switch. And I'm glad. I imagine their first big success being on the Wii had a lot to do with that. But it also could be that World of Goo was published by Nintendo in Japan in 2009. They directly published it themselves. That might also have something to do with it. It's a really interesting, look into, because a lot of indie developers kind of jumped ship around the time of the Wii U. But Tomorrow Corporation didn't, because Little Inferno came out on the Wii U, and it was one of the only consoles it was out on for a while. Overall, upon release, World of Goo was very highly regarded. The Wii version had the highest Metacritic score, obviously, sitting at a 94, until the iOS version dethroned it with a Metacritic score of 96.
That's incredible. Holy cow.
It does also kind of make sense, though. This game would work really well with a touchscreen. I've never played it with a touchscreen, but I can see why it would work incredibly well. Our own Nintendo World Report, the site that we both write for, gave World of Goo, the WiiWare version, a perfect 10. This is the only time so far that I have been reading a wiki article and NWR is mentioned.
Shoutouts.
So that was really cool. It also won multiple awards, including Best Independent Game at the, are you ready for a hell of a throwback? The Spike TV Video Game Awards. Remember those?
Is that the one that like Jeff Keighley? No. Who was the name? Joel McHale. No, that was like the last one, VGX. Who hosted some of those early VGAs?
I don't think I was watching back at that point. I didn't know what Spike TV was at that point. I think I know what Spike TV is because of you guys.
That's probably for the best that you didn't. Yeah.
From what I hear, yes, it sounds like it. And it was also included in Eurogamer's Top 50 Games of 2008, slotted at number 10. Funny story. This apparently caused Peter Moore, who at the time was the head of EA Sports, to write a lengthy rant because FIFA 09 was not on this list, and World of Goo is specifically mentioned in this rant as he is surprised it is there despite having never played it.
I'd laugh at him, but I think he owns like part of Liverpool now, or has something to do with their operations. So yeah, he's doing pretty okay, but that is really interesting. That's a man who's had quite a career.
I find it doubly funny though, because they didn't work for EA Sports, but again, Gabler and Carmel came from EA.
Very
and
true,
here's a guy higher up in EA. And Tootie Boy officially responded to Moore's rant, because apparently they agree with me that it was very funny, saying that they were happy that their game had reached such mainstream acclaim, and also that, quote, they derived sick pleasure from the industry bigwigs' indignant, self-righteous incredulity. Which, well written, I guess. The game was re-updated in 2019 to work with modern hardware and also to make it more moddable for anybody that wanted to do so, because Epic had asked Tomorrow Corporation if they could make it a free giveaway, and the studio decided that that was a good excuse to just go ahead and update the game so that it worked better on modern machines, and that update went out free to everybody and every version on
really smart.
PC.
That's really cool.
So that is the history of World of Goo. So let's talk about the composer, Kyle Gabler, who I've already mentioned before this. Again, he is one of the developers of World of Goo. He was also the illustrator and the writer, alongside being the composer. And also, I imagine, had something to do with the programming, since he made the original prototype. I can't find a lot on the person, but I can find a lot on some of the stuff that he is responsible for. He was one of the contributors to the aforementioned experimental gameplay project that was apparently a student-pitched project at the Entertainment Technology Center of Carnegie Mellon University that began in 2005. And again, it was basically just a group of people who did regular game jams. In fact, I feel like this might be like one of the first examples of a large-scale, like, organized game jam community.
2005 would be pretty early, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine there was anything before that. Obviously, I doubt they were. I feel like a good indicator of that is that the word game jam does not appear on their website at all. So it wasn't named yet, I guess?
Or maybe it had a different name. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe. It's interesting. But for anybody that does not know what a game jam is, just real quick, it is basically a challenge where you give yourself a very limited amount of time and say you have to make a game from scratch. So for them, their 3 rules for these jams were the time limit was 7 days. Each game had to be made by one person. This is not always the case with game jams. Sometimes you are allowed to have a team. And each game had to be based around a common theme, which is something you usually do see in game jams nowadays. But once they had left school, the contributors kind of stopped taking part in the jams themselves, but continued to run the site from the background and began to run design competitions on it. Even as they scattered to various areas around the world, Gabler himself ended up at EA at some point, obviously. But from the sound of it, I don't think he was there for very long. But I can't find any information on when he ended up at EA, when he left. It's again, I can't find a lot of information on the man himself, and I'd love to talk to him one of these days. That sounds like something that would be a lot of fun and a very interesting conversation. But skipping ahead to after World of Goo came out, in 2010, after the success of the game, Gabler, alongside 2 other former EA employees, Alan Blomqvist, who, again, was the one who optimized the game to work on the Wii, and Kyle Gray, formed the studio Tomorrow Corporation, whom I have named a couple of times now. They have continued to produce games ever since, including Little Inferno in 2012, Human Resource Machine in 2015, and 7 Billion Humans in 2018. They are currently apparently working on a game called Welcome to the Information Superhighway, which is a working title that was announced to be in early production in March of 2018.
Little Inferno is a good time. I've played that one.
We played that. Were you around for at least a little bit of it when we played it at Youmacon?
I think so. I think it might have been where I first heard of it.
I think I remember you being there. We used to go to a Detroit convention called Youmacon. Obviously, you went more than I did because you're more local than I am. But we used to go there and have meetups. I think I went to 3 years of it. I'm pretty sure.
Sounds right.
And I believe the last year that we went, there were like 16 people shoved into this hotel room, and we all just played Little Inferno almost from beginning to end. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure we played from beginning to end.
It was a good time. Did I happen to tell you who the first 2 announced voice actors are for Youmacon 2019?
You did not.
It would be one Yuri Lowenthal and Tara Platt.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh no, I'm tempted to go again.
They would be fun to meet. She's in Fire Emblem, Tara Platt.
Ah.
She plays Edelgard.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
It's been very jarring because she sounds like Mitsuru.
Not a surprise, yeah.
But the most important thing that Gabler did, I think, in 2010, Gabler, alongside Carmel, Jonathan Blow, who is known as the developer for Braid and The Witness, Kelly Santiago, who is a former employee of that game company, who is the company that made Journey, Nathan Vella from Cappy, whom I believe they made Super Time Force,
and recently Below,
alongside Matthew Wegner from Flashbang Studios, whom I have never heard of, and Aaron Isaksen from App Above Games, who I also have never heard of. They formed an organization called the Indie Fund that was meant to fund up-and-coming indie projects. I did not know this existed before doing this research, which is kind of surprising, actually, considering how much I enjoy like looking into indie games and the development and stuff. You'd think I would have like caught wind of this at some point, but no. The goal, they say, is to encourage the next generation of game developers by providing them with development funds that don't have the same baggage as your average publishing agreements. So no, like, we own your IP, or we get a certain cut of the money. I couldn't find how they get their money, but what I imagine it probably is like, hey, if you're successful and you want to kick some of that money back towards us so we can, pay it forward to another indie developer, we wouldn't say no to that. But I don't have a full source on that. This fund has partially contributed to the development of 37 games, according to Wikipedia. A few that I recognized off the list are Dear Esther, Monaco, What's Yours Is Mine, The Swapper, Donut County, Gorogoa, Her Story, That Dragon Cancer, which they gave $50,000 of development funds to, and Hollow Knight.
Wow. Those are some amazing games.
And that is just a few. Those are just the ones that I recognized right off the bat. Again, it's 37 games. Only 2 of them are listed as canceled or unreleased.
Mm.
That's incredible, actually. That is such a cool use of money, and that's something that I am a vastly happier person knowing it exists somewhere in the world. Not just because I want to make games myself, but also because, like, what a cool thing to do. And so when I say that World of Goo partially, like, changed the landscape of indie games, this is what I'm talking about. It wasn't just them, obviously. There were a lot of other names on that list, but man, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, make a great work of art and then come up and work with others, and yeah, have all these amazing games happen with, paying it forward. That's incredible.
Yeah. And I wish I had more information on Kyle Gabler, the person. Maybe one day, this can be amended. But until then, his discography is very easy because it's World of Goo, Little Inferno, Human Resource Machine, and 7 Billion Humans.
I mean, that's pretty good games.
Oh yeah, pretty good games. I have not actually played Human Resource Machine or 7 Billion Humans or heard their soundtracks. I have played Little Inferno. We've both played Little Inferno. That one's good.
Yeah.
So, hey. So, some information on the soundtrack itself. While most of the music in World of Goo was written specifically for the game, a lot of it is actually reused or reworked from other small projects that Gabler had written for, or simply music he had written in the past for fun in his free time.
That sounds a lot like Danny Baranowski for Super Meat Boy.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's exactly that. Interesting. That's a good point. For instance, some songs were written for past game projects that Gabler had worked on, like small games that I imagine were probably for the experimental gameplay project. Some were for short films that either himself or his friends were working on. And one was even originally written for a friend's homebrew NES game. Side note, it's my least favorite song in the game. And I'm not even going to mention what it is. That's how much I dislike the song. Most of the instruments on the soundtrack are MIDI, but Gabler does mention that there are a few live performances scattered within. He doesn't really specify which ones, except for in one case that we will get to in a little bit.
Oh, it could have fooled me. A lot of these sound like really good instruments then if they're MIDI instruments. Wow.
Oh, yeah. And he lists the influences on the soundtrack as being Danny Elfman, which is extremely clear, Vangelis, Bernard Herrmann, I assume that's how that would be pronounced,
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer, Ennio Morricone, and a bunch of other big film composers. Those are his words, not mine. Those are the only names he mentioned, and then he said others. So, and the soundtrack is actually available for free on Kyle Gabler's website, so you can go check it out if you like what you hear.
That's how I got it for this episode.
Yeah. Apparently, he was surprised that so many people asked him for the soundtrack that he ended up just releasing the full versions of all the songs. And he even, much to my joy, most of the songs have little blurbs about where they came from or what their purpose was when he wrote them. So let's get into those 5 critical tracks so I can pass those blurbs on to you. Our first one is Ode to the Bridge Builder. Again, this game is about building things. Usually bridges. A lot of the time bridges. Maybe not a lot of the time. But there are a couple levels where you build bridges. And in my opinion, this is the most recognizable song in the entire game. When I think World of Goo, I think this song. And apparently this is the second track that Gabler wrote for the game. It was an attempt, apparently, to create a variation on Amazing Grace in the style of Ennio Morricone's old Western soundtracks. I can kind of hear it.
Yeah, I guess so.
He has the feel of Ennio Morricone kind of down, but I'm not fully hearing Amazing Grace. That trumpet shouts adventure and tells me that I do really want to know what's on the other side of that canyon. Thank you for asking. The track Brave Adventurers is specifically meant to be a livelier version of this song. It's just a nice little piece.
Yeah, some interesting instruments in it, and some of the wow, 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 wow kind of...
The jaw harp?
Yeah. That thing. Definitely very Western influence for sure.
When you mentioned like some of the instruments are very convincing if they're just MIDI, the trumpets. MIDI trumpets 9 times out of 10 are garbage.
I mean, just listen to Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire.
Yeah, go listen to the Dragon Quest XI MIDI soundtrack. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Go listen to it in Smash. Oh man, the MIDI version is so bad.
Oh dear.
Anyways, we're not talking about Dragon Quest today. Maybe one day. Maybe not. I don't know. Let's talk about track number 2. Regurgitation Pumping Station. So this song that came directly out of a spy movie has always been one of my favorite tracks in the game, personally. Like that intense section that really gets me, that was in the sample, it actually plays during the final level of the first world. And for some reason, it's just always stuck with me really, really hard. I think that bass part is a big part of it. Like that standing bass section, chef's kiss, perfect. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I get that. I can totally get that. I think out of the 5 here, for me listening to this soundtrack for the first time, I think this is my favorite. It just sounds really cool, and I think you're absolutely right. A spy movie, it's got that feel to it.
Mm-hmm. According to Gabler, this song was actually meant to be the soundtrack for a friend's short film about going on a date with the devil. I want to watch this short film. I want to know why this was the aesthetic he went with.
I want to watch it in Cuphead animation style.
Yes, actually. Let's make it happen.
They're not working on a DLC or anything. Well, I mean, yeah, they're doing a Netflix show. Right?
Yeah, they're doing a Netflix show. Are they animating that?
No,
we'll talk about it later.
Another studio. It's another studio.
Our third track is Red Carpet Extendomatic. So only the beginning of this song appears in the game, which is a shame because the rest of the song is really good. And apparently was one of the most requested pieces of music for Gabler to release after the game came out, and he doesn't understand why, because he says that it was written as a joke in 2001 for a music class to sound like, quote, every cheap 90s dance song ever made.
Yeah, go listen to the full thing. This one bops.
It's great. I used to use it back in the SMYN days when we did the Game of the Year awards. I would write a short little red carpet special every year to play in front of it. And this is the song I usually used as the background music because red carpet extended. You know why.
You're clever. I get you. No, I had never known what the song was, but now hearing it definitely brought back a lot of memories.
Let's be real. Clever is not the word you wanted to use. It's not the word I'd use. But thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite snippet of information about this song was that apparently the vocalist is an astrophysicist named Jessica. Gabler says, quote, "I gave her a chainsaw for her wedding, and we never spoke again. The end."
So you're saying I shouldn't bring that to Super's wedding?
I didn't say that. If you don't give him a chainsaw for his wedding, then I'll be very disappointed.
Congrats on getting married, SMYN co-host Super.
Yeah, congrats. Unfortunately, I don't get to go because gas is expensive and I can't take time off of work, but congrats anyways. Our next track is Cog in the Machine. Boy, howdy, talk about a change in attitude. So eventually, when you hit the winter chapter, everything is dark and sort of musty, and most of the levels take place in factories, and it's just sort of gross. It feels like what they describe the world in Little Inferno as, like the outside world of Little Inferno. I'm pretty sure that these two worlds are supposed to have the same feels to them. This song was my angst song as a kid. When I was a teenager and I felt angsty, this is the song I would listen to.
It's certainly a noisescape. It's just a lot of sound.
It's very oppressive. It's very sad and melancholy, but it's also just kind of angry. And yeah, it's basically a soundscape. There are other songs that play during this section of the game that are more soundscapey than this, but I still kind of like this song, even though I am no longer an angsty teenager sitting in the cafeteria with my headphones in.
You're hearing the percussion and you're like, want to bang the table.
looking mopey in the corner, thinking, why won't anyone talk to me when the actual reason is because you don't talk to them, you idiot. Bits of this track were apparently originally written for one of Gabler's smaller game projects called Robot and the Cities Who Built Him. Which, that sure is a name.
I'd play that game.
I would too. It's probably still somewhere on the internet. Don't quote me on that. Our last track is Best of Times. This song is generally considered to be the secondary main theme of World of Goo, as it was used in the second trailer released for the game. This song gets intense, but it's still a joy to listen to. Like, I love this song. It's very overdramatic, and I adore it. According to Gabler, this song was originally written for an animated short film he had made with some friends. The vocalists were just a bunch of performers huddled around a single microphone, and the drums were made by banging on chairs and cardboard boxes, and it turned into this.
Sure could have fooled me.
It could have fooled me too. Like, that is some talent.
Yeah, that's amazing. This sounds really good. Really nice job on the audio mixing. Kudos.
Yeah, it's a great song. I really have nothing more to say about it other than it's pretty good.
It's a good one.
So, cutting room floor. This is going to be a week where neither of us have music for the cutting room floor for the other person, because you also have a game that I have never played.
We get to learn like everybody else. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm actually very interested when we have episodes like that, because it potentially turns me on to a game where, like, maybe I ought to give that a shot.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I have 2 tracks on the cutting room floor. The first being Rain, Rain, Windy, Windy. Which is a great name.
I like that. That's cool.
And it was originally written for a short kids film. Gabler says, writing kids music was difficult. And it's a nice little tune. And then, Tumblr. This is the only song that I brought to the party today that has absolutely no snippet to it, unfortunately. But I will say that you can absolutely hear the Danny Elfman in this one.
Oh yeah, it's all over the place. And if you're watching the video version, yes, that word is spelled correctly.
Yes.
Tumblr. I kind of have to do a double take looking at it, but it's spelled correctly.
The internet's ruined everything. So, what will I never forget about the game? This was ostensibly my introduction to indie games in general. This was the first indie game I ever played. I would have played this before Super Meat Boy, before Braid, before... I can't even think of another indie game that I would have played very early. Bastion. This absolutely would have been before Bastion. It's the game that got me interested and made me realize that, like, oh, sometimes small teams can make games and they can be really, really good. It was one of the first games I ever bought on the Wii. I don't actually know why I bought it.
It's a fun title.
It is a fun title. And this is before I would have known, like, I can go on the internet and look up what other people think of video games before I buy them, which was a problem, and as I'm sure it was for many people in their youth. But I have the least regret humanly possible for buying World of GOO. I have probably played it from beginning to end about 10 times. I haven't replayed it in many years, and I should replay it, honestly.
Like on the Switch.
Yeah, I haven't bought it on the Switch yet, but I've been meaning to. And maybe it's about time to pull that trigger and tell you if it has touchscreen controls.
Well, I think I'm tempted to try it on PC and click around with the updated version. Sounds like a great time. Thank you for telling us about it.
It is a very fun game. So, for our transition, before we get into Peter's game, we like to highlight a fan cover or remix, either from YouTube or OC Remix or Dwelling of Duels or wherever. And it was surprisingly hard to find one, actually. I'm kind of shocked at how hard it was to find one. But I did manage to stumble on a very good remix of Best of Times called GOO Revolt, featuring Amanda Apiarius. Apiarius. Yeah, there we go. Amanda Apiarius. I'm sorry, Amanda, if you're somehow watching this. By Josh Welchel, or on YouTube, he is Twitterer.
Twitterer?
One of those three. So please enjoy that.
Hey, Amanda, you've got a really nice voice. That was awesome. Kudos. Let's talk about my game, Hotel Dusk, Room 215. Now, this is, I think, a game it's very niche. And, you don't really hear too much about it, but those that have played it, like myself, do speak highly of it. Now, granted, I wouldn't say like the story stuck with me. It's not a narrative that, left the biggest impact, but I always remember its distinct look and honestly, its soundtrack. I love this soundtrack, but honestly, it's also just a game that not a lot of people have played. So you may be hearing this and what the heck is Hotel Dusk Room 215? Well, it's a game that was released in North America on Nintendo DS. And this was on January 22nd, 2007. Japan got the game a few days later, January 25th, 2007. Australia waited until February 22nd, and the EU, April 13th, 2007. So kind of all in the beginning part of 2007 there. Prime time for Nintendo DS games to be released. This was a game that was developed by Cing. C-I-N-G. And if you're like, I've never heard of that, well, it might be because Cing is now a developer that went bankrupt in 2010. Cing no longer exists. They were a Japanese indie studio, actually. They developed Little King's Story, the Another Code series, which in North America was known as Trace Memory. Seeing the protagonist for that game, it's like a girl or either that or a boy with long hair, pretty young, red shirt, white hair. And I looked at that character. I'm like, oh, that's the character in Smash as a Spirit. I recognize that. So I get, it was a DS and a Wii game. They had two games in that Another Code Trace Memory series. And then also Monster Rancher DS. So Cing had a pretty brief history. Hotel Dusk and its sequel being among them. And ultimately this game, Hotel Dusk Room 215, was published by Nintendo. This game is a point-and-click mystery adventure game. And, they're pretty standard, right? I mean, Ace Attorney and games like that. I mean, you read, you make choices, you investigate scenes and all that. The weird part about Hotel Dusk Room 215 is its big hook is that you hold the DS like a book. You rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise to hold it. And it's, pretty small, especially, DS Lite to kind of just hold in the palm of your hand. The idea being, the touch screen is on the right side of the screen. So yeah, it's more convenient for those who are right-handed, but left-handed players could play it as well. You just kind of reach across the DS there. So certainly an odd control scheme.
I think the only other game I can think of that controlled like that was Rhythm Heaven. The DS Rhythm Heaven. You have to hold it like that, but I can't think of any others.
It's pretty rare, certainly. And it's not like, Kid Icarus Uprising uncomfortable, right? But it can get uncomfortable if you play for a long period of time. But it really works for this game, especially when it comes to conversations between characters, because, they're framing things in portrait rather than landscape. And you're having one character on each side of the DS screens, like talking towards each other. And of course, this was a time before, or just really before, smartphones took off with the iPhone. So the whole framing things in portrait is like now usually a cardinal sin, but I guess now we're kind of used to it because of how people film things on phones. But seeing these two things framed in portraiture, looking at each other, it certainly worked for the time. But because it's a point-and-click mystery adventure game, the actual gameplay itself, you're exploring environments, you're talking to characters, you're making correct conversation decisions to uncover this necessary information that you need to move the plot forward. One of the interesting aspects of Hotel Dusk that I mentioned earlier is there's a very notable art style to it, in that the backgrounds are colored 3D environments with this, big, broad brushstroke style. The characters are drawn and animated in a black and white sketched rotoscoping style. And so you have these black and white characters that pop out against the colored backgrounds. Also, the game uses the DS's variety of features, including the touchscreen, the microphone, and even the closable cover in a variety of ways. It says on the Wikipedia page it even supports the DS Rumble Pack, and I forgot that was a thing that existed.
Same. That was you put it in the GBA slot, didn't you?
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, go figure on that one. The plot of this murder mystery adventure game for Hotel Dusk Room 215, it's December 1979, and Kyle Hyde is haunted by a memory from his time as a New York City police officer. He's got his former partner, Brian Bradley, held at gunpoint for some reason, got him in his sights, and Kyle fired. But he knows that Bradley is still alive. Now, Hyde works for a company currently called Red Crown. It's a front as he's a door-to-door salesman for some home goods, but he takes on jobs from his boss named Ed regarding digging up things that don't want to be found. So this latest job takes Kyle Hyde to Hotel Dusk, which is a motel just outside of Los Angeles, with a fabled room 215 that is said to grant wishes. Now, over the course of his stay at Hotel Dusk, Hyde will learn of his connections to different occupants of the hotel that have all these different connections and relations to his past, as he will continue his hunt for Bradley's whereabouts. He also discovers along the way a quiet girl named Mila, and Mila was the last word that Bradley uttered to Hyde after he was shot. So there are all these different characters that take up residence at this Hotel Dusk, and they're all connected in some way, and it's all Kyle Hyde's goal to discover what's the underlying backstory here. Where is Bradley? What's going on here? You mentioned you have not played this game before, and I find it interesting that seemed to know very little about it, so I'm happy to share.
Yeah, I have never played it. I've heard the name. I believe it is on a list of like possible, if we need to do a special episode of Smash Your Pieces, here it is, because it's got spirits in Smash, doesn't it?
It does have a spirit in Smash, and we'll get to specifics there, but certainly Kyle Hyde is a spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And it's always cool to see a game like that be recognized in some way. It's like, oh, they didn't forget. Like that's always a nice thing.
But yeah, I think I shocked you before we started recording, where I was like, not only have I never played this game, I don't think I've ever seen gameplay.
Which I think is very interesting because, yeah, it certainly has this very unique style to it. I played it probably 5 years ago or so, and I enjoyed it. But like I said, the plot didn't fully stick with me, but you remember the characters, you remember the art style, you remember the music most of all, which is why I had to talk about this game eventually on this show, but now's a good time to do that. So Hotel Dusk Room 15 was originally announced on October 5th, 2005 as Wish Room, which references the Room 215's rumored power in the game. Actually, the game's final title in Japan is Wish Room Tenshi no Kyoku, or Wish Room Angel's Memory. So that was news to me. I didn't know this was known as Wish Room, but the first public appearance of the game was at E3 2006, and that was in May 9th, 2006.
It used to be in May?
Yeah, in E3 2006. I mean, that was a big one. I mean, whether it was for Brawl, or the original trailer there, or the infamous Sony ones. So, yeah, I guess so.
Somehow I didn't know that. It's just always been in June or July.
Mm-hmm. As far as we knew. Production on the game took about 1.5 years with 20 staff members involved. They tried to aim the game at more of an adult audience, which kind of, makes sense. More players were playing games on DS. I mean, DS is a huge platform, and they're trying to tap into that adult market. Not necessarily, the big brain academy, old people trying to learn and all that, right? But
that's another game that plays sideways.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I was trying to think of what it was called.
That's another one, but they wanted to tap into the the narrative theme of Everybody Has a Wish. Wish Room.
That's such a goofy name. I love it so. Why didn't they call it that here?
It might have caught on a little bit more, actually. The team wanted to have a, quote, an unprecedented visual expression not found in any other game, and I think they certainly succeeded, because for those that don't know, the idea of rotoscoping, it's a style where animators trace over motion picture footage frame by frame to produce realistic action. So, I mean, whether it's from, something shot with a live camera, a movie, a TV show, when an animator, traces over that on wax paper or what have you, but frame by frame to create the realistic sense of motion. A perfect example is Aha's Take On Me music video. When he jumps into the drawing, and it looks so real, but it's a drawing. It's because of rotoscoping. And even the team admitted that Take On Me was an admitted inspiration for the game. Rotoscoping, though, isn't used all that often in video games, though, and it's absolutely memorable here. It ends up creating these realistic and genuine-looking character expressions, despite their black and white over color background appearance. So I think it really stands out in that way. And it's something you have to see for yourself. I mean, I'll put in the video version in the tease here, but it's fantastic. I think it stands out. Reviews, though, generally favorable, I guess. A Metacritic of 78. I think, if anything, the game's biggest critique is that it's, quote, unrelentingly linear, as the New York Times put it. Of course, like many games in this genre, you kind of have to wait for the game's plot to catch up and come around regarding solving certain mysteries, because you may have figured it out in your head already, but there's no way for you to jump in. You got to wait for the game to tell its story.
Phoenix Wright sort of has the same problem in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I know where I know where point B is, but I got to go to like point A, point 5 first.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just an unfortunate trap of these kind of games. Now, I wouldn't call Hotel Dusk Room 215 an award-winning game at all. Yeah, just a quaint DS adventure, memorable for its controls, art, and soundtrack. It sold 213,208 copies in Japan in 2007, making it the 76th best-selling game of the year there. So, didn't set the world on fire, but, as I teased earlier, there was a sequel. Last Window, The Secret of Cape West, was released for Nintendo DS in Japan on January 14th, 2010, so about 3 years later, and in Europe on September 17th, 2010. North America never saw this game because of Sing's bankruptcy.
Oh, no.
So, it's a game that, yes, the DS is, region unlocked. You could import the game if you want to. The game actually does continue Kyle Hyde's story. It's set a year later after Hotel Dusk's events. Kyle Hyde is still the protagonist. It's a game I've never played, but, I want to.
I wonder if it's got a fan translation.
Well, I mean, it's for Europe. I mean, they do have an English version.
So it did come out in English. All right.
Yes, it did, but just never in the States. And again, you could probably import it. The game exists. There's a sequel. It's out there, and it's wow. That's a tough one. But the story of these developers doesn't really end there, because some former dev team members over at Sing, after the company closed, including Hotel Dusk's director, Taisuke Kanasaki, they'd later find themselves at Arc System Works. And then, we talked about them with Dragon Ball FighterZ, right? Axis Games would eventually help Arc System Works publish 2016's 3DS title, Chase, Cold Case Investigations, Distant Memories. This stars a protagonist that looks very reminiscent of, but actually is not, Kyle Hyde. It was a game I remember coming out in 2016, and that looks a lot like Hotel Dusk. And sure enough, it's like, that's the director of the game working on the team, and a few other members at Sing. So really interesting. It just kind of continues on there. We mentioned Kyle Hyde returning as a spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but there was a bigger presence of the game in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which makes sense. It was only about a year later. Kyle Hyde was a trophy in Brawl. Notably, he was the only one that was actually animated in series history. Yes, a trophy animated in Smash Brothers. Kyle Hyde was also a sticker, along with Dunning-Smith, the owner of the hotel, and then also the aforementioned Mila. So Kyle Hyde, Dunning-Smith, Mila, all stickers in Brawl. There was an interesting quote from the CEO, the president of Sing at the time, and just kind of made me reflect a little bit. He said, quote, "We think in the future there will be games where people can deduct and draw conclusions with various other people at the same time by making use of a network feature. We think at that time games will become truly interactive." And I can't think of a game where that's really happened, even though like that was at a time where like network features were just barely blossoming, especially on handhelds. I can't think of a game where like you're deducing and solving problems in an adventure game like this with other people. That's a really interesting idea, I think.
I think that would be fun. I don't know how it would work, but I think that somebody could figure it out. Somebody that's smarter than I am. And that would be very interesting. Yes, I agree.
It's a good way of putting it. It sounds like fun. I don't know how to work, but it'd be fun. But I think the perfect encapsulation of Hotel Dusk Room 215 was this little snippet from its Wikipedia page that said, in 2011, adventure gamers named Hotel Dusk the 65th best adventure game ever released. And boy, is it. Like, it's good enough to be on a top 100, but it isn't among the best.
Good to know.
So yeah, it's an interesting game. It's one worth playing, or at least, seeing a little bit of and seeing if it's for you. The composer of the soundtrack for Hotel Dusk Room 215 is one Satoshi Okubo. Satoshi Okubo appears to be based out of Tokyo, Japan. He is part of T's Music. So for the third week in a row, I'm talking about T's Music. And now I'm realizing that it's actually a group of more than 40 members.
Oh, wow. No wonder.
Talk about Rei Kondo. We talk about Masahiro Aoki. And now Satoshi Okubo is also as a part of this group. On SoundCloud, he goes by, looks like the page, S_Okubo. There's only a couple tracks there and just kind of creations of his own. Unfortunately, his personal and professional websites, according to VGMDB.net, are dead Yahoo links.
Oh.
So that's about where the research ends. Apparently, Satoshi Okubo is also a kind of common name, or at least it certainly isn't uncommon in Japan. To the point where, like, I was coming across Google searches where there was like a federal crime case in the United States, like federal.gov had a whole PDF opened against one Satoshi Okubo, where it was like, oh, this one time, in 2004, he's working at this company called Elna, and there's a conspiracy with electronics and all that. Not the same Satoshi Okubo, but still fascinating that
you can't prove that.
Someone with that name. I know. I think it was like he worked at that company until like 2009. It's like, well, Hotel Dusk was here. No, it's just it's really tough to find information on this composer. Is what I'm really trying to get at. So but his discography is pretty interesting, apparently. So he worked on Hotel Dusk as well as the sequel, Last Window, and he worked on Sing's other series, Another Code, as we previously mentioned. Like T's Music, they worked on a Sengoku Basara game. He worked on Sengoku Basara 4. But he's also been recently, it seems to be, the Mario Party composer. Mario Party Island Tour on 3DS, Mario Party Star Rush also on 3DS, and Super Mario Party on Nintendo Switch. Didn't really give any indication if he was like the lead composer or just on the composition team or just the music lead, but involved with those games. So at least he seems to have a career beyond Sing and all that, but it's just very secretive. So as far as overall history and development research on the soundtrack, it's a niche game from a bankrupt developer and a composer that wants no presence online. Sorry guys, I don't know what to say. We talked about, Toshiyuki Kishi last week and how there's nothing. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the case this week as well, which is a shame.
Yeah, not much you can do at that point.
It's a shame because I love this soundtrack and I really am looking forward to talking about it. So let's get into those 5 critical tracks. When it comes to talking about the 5 tracks that are really key and essential to Hotel Dusk, we got to start with Monochrome. This is far and away the most common theme in the game. It plays whenever you are navigating throughout the hotel. You're going up and down the hallways, even if it's in a bigger room and you're moving. This theme comes in and it'll get in your head pretty quickly. I think the vibraphone really makes this one work. The kind of just imagining like the percussion mallets kind of hitting it. The flute comes in for a little bit of support. And of course, the title Monochrome absolutely works because it's that, black and white character design. Even though you're just moving about a colorful world, I just kind of cutting through all that noise per se. So, yeah, this is one you'll definitely learn to love. Not that it's not fantastic already, but this is the one you'll definitely associate with this game.
It sounds like something I would hear in an elevator, though. To be fair, that's not to say that it's bad. It's very, very, how do I describe it?
Muzak?
It's very, it's Muzak kind of, but also I think you're right. I think the vibraphone really, really helps this song along like a lot. And also it just feels like this is a song that I feel like I would hear while walking through a store in a game.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think like really good elevator music is a good way to describe this soundtrack. Like, yeah, it does have an element of elevator music to it, but it's really good. It's really catchy. It's especially memorable. I think that's a good way of putting it. Second track on the Critical 5 here, Straight Chaser. So this one kind of gets paired with Monochrome quite a bit because you're moving about the hotel and then you're getting to an area where it plays where Kyle has to explore a very set scene for like a specific press, a specific click, a specific, touch of the stylus on a really, pixel point area for you to advance. Like you're trying to study like what's wrong about this scene? What do I have to click specifically to move on? So it's just really this casual exploration theme. Some people point it as like, oh, it's Kyle Hyde's theme. I guess maybe. Sure. The most fascinating thing I think about the piece, though, is its 5/4 time signature. And this is where the music nerds out there listening picked up on this immediately. But it's the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. It's not your 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's this time signature that purposely keeps you off balance as you're trying to study your environment closely. And I think if we're trying to get the best estimation of what this game sounds like, it's probably this track with its different instruments here and there. But yeah, that 5/4 time signature just floors me every time because it's so rare to come across that.
This one sounds very Ace Attorney too, though. I like. It's possible, I guess, that they would have been inspired by Ace Attorney because those were GBA games before we got them.
Yeah, Japanese indie developers, sure.
So it's very possible that was like a purposeful sort of inspiration thing. I don't know. That's what it reminds me of immediately. It actually reminds me more of modern Ace Attorney, though. Yes, like something I would hear in like Apollo Justice or Dual Destinies. More so than I would hear in the original trilogy.
Yeah, I get that. Absolutely. That's absolutely a good way to kind of shows some comparisons. And yeah, Apollo Justice also on DS kind of makes sense. Third track here, On the Rocks. So this one plays during these really tense, questioning interrogations. And you'll talk to people throughout the game's chapters, but usually they're lighthearted conversation. You're just gathering information. But this is when you're really trying to corner someone to giving up their big secret. So it's really tense. It's generally at the climax of the chapter. And note how the percussion is ticking like a clock. And you're getting short on time. You gotta press these people for information. Time is of the essence, because in Hotel Dusk, if you make like wrong decisions or if you follow wrong paths of investigation, there's actually a game over, like a failed state where Kyle's kicked out of the hotel and you don't get to solve the rest of the game. So choose wisely here. So there's the pressure of the ticking clock, and the bass and piano hits come in, just really remind you of the tension of the scene, and the strings kind of flow through it and maintain this melody. But in the clip, you notice that the piece really picks up, and I think this is especially Ace Attorney like sounding. Just really an investigation kind of theme, and I think it's fitting. Like, you're really trying to narrow in on key information that you need.
This is a very good week for bass parts, though.
Yeah.
Like, between this and Pumping Station, I really, really like a good sort of loud bass part, because the joke is always like, oh, bass players, nobody ever hears what they do. And for the most part, yes. But just goes to show you that when a bass part's really good, it really, really pushes the song along. And also, I didn't even, when I was listening to the full version and also the clip that you made sure I had before we started recording, I didn't even think about the ticking clock part. Mm-hmm. So there we go. That certainly does add another layer to this song that I didn't notice before. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So Compose of the Future, bass part, piano. Joe's just turns into putty.
And then you just maybe not both of those together. I don't know if that's the greatest combination, but
you got to be a string bass in like a jazz ensemble or something like that. Yeah,
specifically
absolutely.
a string bass, but another. What do you call those?
Like bass guitars? Yeah, electric bass.
Yeah, electric there we bass. Go.
Ding, 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 ding.
Electric basses can be good, but you can't go wrong with obviously, this is an electric bass sound, obviously, is what it's supposed to be. But you can't go wrong with a standing bass.
Yeah, not at all. That's a pretty good one. Number 4 here on the Critical 5 for Hotel Dusk. Play It Again. So at the end of each chapter, Hotel Dusk's thing is it kind of makes you recap the chapter's events, and it makes it really episodic in a way. Like, you're going through each chapter and Kyle's kind of going through in his head. It's like, all right, what happened? Some reviewers called it really patronizing, that it's like you're going to do like a reading comprehension question or a set of questions, but it's
the Yakuza games do it too, and nobody complains about that.
It's a good way to just make sure like you're following along with what's happening. And so this song plays at the end of the chapter when you're answering those questions. All sorts of DS instruments, really done well at play here. The aforementioned string bass, the upright bass. You got drums going, you got some synths, even some sax. Like that sax especially, and we're talking Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, like DS sax. There's something about that particular MIDI instrument. It's just quintessential there. But this is another one where it's like, yeah, you're going to hear the song a lot. Better get used to it. It's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about it. The sax sound font for the DS. That's a good point. Because usually brass instruments sound awful in MIDI.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are very few brass instruments that sound good. If you want to like hear the worst MIDIs on earth, any trumpet MIDI, any one of them, except for the World of GOO one we were talking about. Apparently, I guess Kyle Gabler found the greatest one on earth. But for some reason, on the DS, any game that involves the sax, because I want to say, yeah, like Fragrance of Tart Coffee.
Oh, yeah.
there's just somehow the DS can do really good saxophone MIDI. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's not a bad saxophone emulation. It's not a perfect one, but it's like it's just perfectly DS. Like that's that sound. But for number 5, it's a song that pairs perfectly with Play It Again. It's Midnight. So, likewise, this also plays at the end of these story recaps at the end of each chapter in Hotel Dusk. But it plays when you've answered these reading comprehension questions correctly. So, you're getting like the play it again sort of pick me up sort of sound, but then when you answer the question correctly, it goes into this song when Kyle's like, oh yeah, this is what happened, and this and this and this, to really kind of talk through to the player, kind of refresh in his own memory. Yes, this is what happened. And this is my favorite track on the OST. Like, it is just the perfect recap music, to the point where if you've followed my previous podcast projects, you should be rather familiar with this song. I do like to use it quite a lot. That sort of news-like sort of sound is just too perfect. The flute is too good. So I think maybe that's another theme for this week. You know, past projects use different songs here and there.
So this is your Red Velvet from Katawa Shoujo.
Sure, yeah.
Like how I use that song all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just a fantastic song. It's just another part of the reason why I love this soundtrack a whole lot. Midnight is a very, very good one.
I think I agree that of the songs, I did not listen to the full soundtrack. I did not have a chance, but I did listen to all the songs that you put on the list here, and I think, yeah, I agree. This is my favorite of them all.
Yeah, and it's a perfect place in the game for it. Another one where you'll certainly remember it. It's one of these ones where, like, when you go through the soundtrack after the fact, when you play the game, and it's just like, oh yeah, that song. I remember that song. It's just really memorable in that way. Couple tracks on the cutting room floor here, though. Number 1, we've got Hangover Blues. So this is Dunning's main theme, and as I mentioned, he is the owner of the hotel, so he's kind of at the front desk there. Kyle will have conversations with him, and this is what plays in Conversations with Dunning. There's really a good swing to this one, and I think, you know, when we're talking about DS sound fonts and instruments they're trying to replicate, that sure is an attempt at a harmonica, I think.
I like harmonica midis most of the time. This is a very good one.
It doesn't have like the extra layer, like when a harmonica's trying to do more than one sound, but if we're talking about like, you know, singular tones, like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's this, I think a good swing to it is a good description of the song. It reminds me of something from a different game, and I cannot for the life of me think of what it is. A specific song.
Is it maybe like something Kingdom Hearts-ish?
Maybe? I don't think it's Kingdom Hearts.
That's tough to put on a spot. I'm not sure.
Bebop. It sounds like kind of like something you'd hear in Bebop, but in MIDI, obviously not Bebop. A lot of it is live instruments, but this kind of sounds like something I'd hear in Bebop, like during an Ed episode or something.
Not a game, but yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah. Not a game. My brain is a million miles away, apparently.
The other track I have on the cutting room floor is Violet Sky. So this plays in a couple places. I think most notably kind of at the end credits. There's like a starring section where like they're highlighting each character, like this game was, starring this person and this person. So it plays there. But it also really plays as part of these different side story resolutions for the different occupants of the hotel. They all have problems and Kyle can help solve them. And when you do so, like it's this really uplifting music that plays. Like, yeah, everything's okay. It's really light and airy with the flute and some of the acoustic guitar, but it's like you did it. It's just so refreshing and it's really memorable in that way.
Yeah, I like it.
So what will I never forget about Hotel Dusk Room 215? I mean, I certainly have never played a video game like a book before, but this was a pretty good one to do so. And yeah, it's this art style that I don't think I've ever seen anyone else try rotoscoping, much less the monochromatic style, black and white characters that are really well detailed and move so effortlessly and realistically on this big brushstroke colored 3D environment. It's a look all its own. And honestly, for like some of the rough polygons that those 3D backgrounds have, it's just like, it's all about the DS at a time where DS was at its peak. And that's what I'll really remember. But the soundtrack, and boy, I love certain tracks on this one. So I'm glad I got to share it, even though I sadly did not learn a whole lot about Satoshi Okubo.
The rotoscoping, I can think of one indie game that also does rotoscoping, and it's 10 minutes long. So the fact that this is a full game is very impressive and has piqued my curiosity quite a bit, honestly.
Yeah, if it's something you're interested in at home, certainly there are means of playing this game if you want to. But if you'd like to own a copy at, say, a GameStop, I think it's right now like $10. Like if you can find it, it's super cheap. Pop it in your 3DS. Have a great time. Though it doesn't really do the save state, suspension all that well, because at certain points you are meant to close the DS. I think when I was playing it, I was, used to playing 3DS, so I closed the DS like that. And the game was just still running, so I opened back up, and it's like, you have like 40 hours on. I'm like, oh, I just left it running. It didn't, save it. Oops. So just a little forewarning for that. So yeah, I think ink, whether it's black or just the texture or things like that, between World of Goo and Hotel Dusk Room 215, not games that a whole lot of people play, but games with really solid soundtracks that I'm glad we got to talk about. I'm glad we got to, show each other, show you listening or watching at home. And that will do it for this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at Vidobaga. You can catch the video version over on rhymeswithasia.com, also on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version you want over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. But honestly, go on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, download that MP3, bring it with you on a run, on a drive, at work, in the gym. Your boss can catch you listening, but you're saying like, boss, I'm listening to great soundtracks about video game music. And he'll be like, okay, back to work.
You know what? You get a promotion.
That's right. So how about that Spotify playlist? Anything on it this week?
Sadly, no. Neither of these soundtracks are on Spotify. World of Goo, I imagine, because it's available free elsewhere, they really have no reason to. And Hotel Dusk, I imagine, the bankruptcy probably has something to do with that.
Probably a big reason. Come on, Kyle. You should make that happen.
But unfortunately, neither.
That is unfortunate. Well, contact us on social media. We're at Soundchat OST. You can let us know how we're doing with, some feedback on these episodes and give us some suggestions on soundtracks you'd like us to cover in the future. And we've got some possibly special projects kicking up in the future, so stay tuned in the coming weeks. We've got some possible things we'll keep doing episodes as we normally do them every week, certainly, but just some extra content for you guys. We're trying to think of how to broaden what we do.
Guys, it's going to be really cool. It's going to be really cool. I'm very excited for it.
Pretty exciting, absolutely. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I'm going to be talking about Lena Raine.
Ooh, excellent. I will be talking about Greg Edmondson. So, some great games and great soundtracks there as well. To play us out, I will highlight a YouTube fan cover here. Again, not a lot of covers here for a niche game like Hotel Dusk Room 215, but I found one for Hangover Blues, and it's specifically a blues cover by YouTuber Mairiba, Mairiba. Specifically, he plays a melodica in this. That's what drives the main melody here of Hangover Blues. It's great. I like it a lot. I think you will too. Thanks so much for listening to us this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.